Hello, welcome back, welcome to 2021. I hope you are staying healthy, I hope you are staying safe, and I hope you are staying positive, because that's what we need in 2021. I'm Camille, Diabetic, your diabetes tech guy, and if you want to follow along for more videos about diabetes technology like this and beyond, please make sure you're subscribed. And I'm kicking off 2021 with a really interesting video. A couple of days ago, I sat down to interview co-founder and CEO of Diabeloop, Erik Huneker. So in the first half of the interview, I focused on the software, on Diabeloop's algorithm, and we really went into some specifics on how Diabeloop is doing this personalized aspect of learning about someone's lifestyle or physiology. I eat chocolate croissants every morning. And then second half, we went into a lot of details about CGM partnerships and pump partnerships and their commercial pipeline. They have the big European launch this year, and a couple of days ago they had some announcements about the US plans, and there's also Japan and a lot of good stuff. So I really hope you find this interesting. Please let me know what you think about it down in the comments. Just before you watch, I want to make it absolutely clear, this is not a sponsored video. I was not paid by Diabeloop to make this video. And so this is my video interview with Diabeloop's co-founder and CEO, Erik Huneker. Okay, so let's dive into the algorithm a little bit. And so do you mind confirming to me the target range of the actual algorithm at the moment?
You can set it between 100 and 180.
Okay.
Now, 180 may seem very high, but there's this little thing called oh shoot, I forgot the actual name of it. But basically, if you start off with a very high average glucose or HbA1c, you don't want to lower that too quick, because then you have an increased risk of particularly blindness, sudden blindness coming out that sometimes can be permanent. So you want to be able to bring it down gradually. And so in certain circumstances, 170 as a target actually makes sense sometimes. I mean, rarely, but it happens.
So just to clarify, that's a target that as a person living with diabetes, I can kind of, if I know I'm going to go through a certain activity, for example, I can customize that on the device.
Yes, although typically if you're going through an activity, you're much better off either telling the system that you're going to be having physical activity, for example, and physical activity will increase your target at the beginning of your physical activity, because not every physical activity, most physical activity, you're going to decrease if you're running, etc.
Yeah.
And so that's much easier to do it that way. Or you can tell the system that you want to have a period of what we call Zen mode. Zen mode, the use case for Zen mode is you're on vacation, you're driving, you don't exactly know what you've eaten, or you've eaten at odd times, you've got kids in the back, not exactly the most quiet time, you don't want a hypo, you don't want a system to tell you that an alert hypo, you don't care if for a few hours you're a little bit higher. You just want to be left alone with hypos. Other use case is you've got a very stressful interview coming up, or a meeting, those kind of things where you want to make 100% certain that your system doesn't bother you with a hypo or a alert for a upcoming hypo. And Zen mode basically increases the target temporarily and also manages basically insulin on board and the aggressiveness a little bit to make sure that over your set time, you're not bothered.
Right. I would love to know who you spoke to during your research, because I would love to know people who are just so chilled, so zenned out. Like, I need more people like that in my life.
Yeah, we didn't come up with that name. We didn't come up with that name.
Oh, did you know? So
it's literally a couple of patients, and one of them who is really quiet, who said during our
right.
discussion and the research, and he said, "Well, just call it Zen mode." Like, okay, sure, that works.
That's perfect. So you actually took their suggestion and you called that. That's so funny. And another feature, you mentioned Zen mode. I think there is when I was kind of researching Diabeloop ahead of this interview, one of the things that I picked out on is privacy mode. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, during our extensive discussions and also our own philosophy of when we created it, it's like it's the patient's data, okay? And some people want to make sure that their data is not shared. So the first of all is that you can share the data with anyone you want, or not share it at all. But sometimes you want to share it with your doctor or your spouse, and there's a specific use case that was actually important to certain people. I know most people don't care, some people care about it a lot. That they want to have either a weekend off, you know, a
Yeah.
weekend where you're not going to care about it, you're going to have fun. Some people may drink too much alcohol or just whatever, you know,
Yeah.
have fun,
Yeah.
have the weekend off, and you don't want your doctor to come back a month later saying, "What happened that weekend?" Yet the rest of the time, you may want to share it. And so you have that privacy mode where no data will be uploaded, period. Not to anything, anyone. It will sit on your phone forever and not be uploaded whatsoever.
It's the diabetes software equivalent of the privacy tab on your browser when you just don't want any data, any cookies or anything like that.
Sure.
Thanks for
And
clarifying that.
it's basically it's not just the use cases, it's also a philosophy of it's your data. You should be
Yeah.
able to do with it as you wish, and not just a black and white share, not share. Now, is this a perfect level of granularity? You know, you can always talk about it, but we think it's a good level of it gives people what they need, people living with diabetes, the tools they need, yet it's simple enough to use.
And that's just simple button on the controller. You just press that and then it's off.
Yes, by default. I mean, you can set the time as well.
Perfect. Okay, all right, that's cool. Okay, another thing. Speaking of the software, the algorithm, does the actual algorithm administer correction boluses?
Yes. So either
Can
it does both correction boluses, a series of micro boluses, basal rate adjustments. It depends on the situation.
right, and can you and it's capable of kind of giving that correction bolus as frequently as it wants, every 5 minutes, even if it has to?
Yeah, well, typically what it's going to do, because it has the advantage of running every 5 minutes, okay? Whereas a normal human person is not going to be looking at data every 3 minutes, well, although many people living with type 1 do it, but whatever.
We've got Instagram, you know, we've got Instagram to look at, yeah.
This is a software that has nothing else to do. So what it's going to do is going to say, okay, it looks like it's needed right now, or it's going to be needed. Let me shoot a certain number and then adjust 5 minutes later, depending on what the updated forecast is, if you will, simplify things. And so it's going to be able to send a number of boluses, but also always remembering what has been sent in the past, obviously, because you never want to send too much for fairly obvious.
Of course. No, that's yeah, that's great. That's exactly what I kind of wanted to get. And drawing on from that, and you mentioned knowing what happened in the past, which nicely draws me to my next kind of point that I wanted to talk about, which is this long-term learning aspect of Diabeloop. And I think that's something that is really difficult to kind of talk about, because it just, when someone hears AI, they just turn off their laptop. So talk to me about how Diabeloop is using past data to change some of the settings.
First of all, I have an issue with the word artificial intelligence. I typically rather use machine learning, but
Right.
whatever. Same stuff. The whole idea is that when an expert patient or an expert nurse or a diabetologist is going to be looking at data, he's going to be looking at trends. Okay. Hey, this person overall always needs more insulin at that time of the day, or on general needs, he's going to have a lot of correction boluses. So rather than have a correction boluses, maybe he should have slightly more insulin at the meal or a higher basal rate. So it's taking those thinkings, looking at weeks worth of data, and trying to do with a machine learning algorithm. If you have the perfect doctor or the perfect nurse or the perfect expert patient in your pocket that was looking at your data over a week's worth and saying, hey, that's funny. On average, most days you need more in the afternoon. Well, rather than waiting until it goes up, maybe it makes sense to send a little more insulin earlier before it goes up. And that's basically the math behind it is complicated and quite cumbersome. But because we have both expertise in building simulators, really complicated simulators, and not for the fun of being complicated, but because diabetes is complicated. And there's a huge amount of variability. There's no two people living with diabetes that have the same physiology or the same lifestyle. And so you've got to be able to account for variable physiologies, variable lifestyles, weird things happening, weird meaning unusual things happening, which it's life, it happens. So you've got to take it all that into account to build your simulators. Once you have your simulators and you have your machine learning tools and your real life data, you need all three, then you can start building your machine learning algorithm to look at that long-term data. Because I was having a discussion with Guy Davis, a patient on Twitter the other day, and it says that the norm is 50% basal insulin, 50% meal insulin.
Right.
It's the norm. No, it's not the norm. It's an average.
Yeah.
That average hides some people needing 20-80, others needing 80-20. So trying to fix a scheme on everyone is just totally unrealistic. On the other hand, asking people to program their software, their system, their algorithm with perfectly precise numbers is not realistic either. So the only way to make that work is to do the self-learning. Self-learning meaning a learning that is individualized to each person's physiology/lifestyle. And I keep talking about both because it's not possible to separate physiology and lifestyle.
Yeah, no. So maybe let's discuss an example, and let's maybe talk about lifestyle. So let's say that I'm using Diabeloop, and let's say that I go to the gym every workday. No, that's a terrible example. That's a terrible example. Let's say that I eat a really carby breakfast each morning. I eat chocolate croissants every morning. And then it turns out that my carb ratio in the morning is actually not sufficient because of the fat or whatever. First of all, how long would it take for the algorithm to notice that there is this trend before it makes those decisions? And can you talk through that that time scale, kind of how that happens?
So we have two levels of self-learning. Right. The first is at a 48-hour to 3-day horizon. Okay.
Right.
So it's going to start making adjustment after a big 24 hours, 36 hours worth of data.
Right.
That's the first level. And then your second level is it will need at least 10 days to start doing anything. And it will need at least 3 to 6 weeks to stabilize. Now, stabilize. There's no such thing as a stable diabetes. We know that. So, for example, if there's trend going towards the summer, where many people need slightly less insulin during the summer, not for everyone, but many. And so what you have then is that trend is going to see that trend, even though during the winter, the self-learning was kind of stabilized. At some point of time, if it trends differently because of summer, because of you change your eating habits, you started going to the gym 3 times per week, things like that.
The January trend, is this what you call the January trend? Yeah. Got you.
That's going to start to adjust. Now,
right.
It cannot, this is not magic, it's if a perfect expert cannot detect a trend, the machine learning will not be able to do it either. That's the first thing. And the second thing is you don't want to be overly aggressive either, because then what happens if you go, I don't know, skiing for a week, or you have the flu for a week, or, there's things that last a week that have an impact. You don't want things to be too aggressive. So it's going to be slowly, gently learning for your patterns. If the patterns do tend to repeat over a number of weeks, then it's going to start reinforcing those patterns, the opposite of those patterns, in order to predict better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah, and I think we need to be careful to say that it's those systems are not designed to detect like every single kind of minor thing that happens. They look at, like you said, like 10 of a much longer period of time before making these adjustments. And also there is the expert supervisor system. Can you talk about that, which is part of the short-term learning, which ensures that nothing crazy happens internally?
So what happens is that machine learning is not perfect, okay? And so what we have is that we have one patented technology, which is actually fairly complicated, that looks at, did the machine learning piece understand what's happening? How reliable is the understanding of the situation? And that threshold is actually fairly low, meaning that if anything kind of weird or odd or unusual or things that shouldn't make sense happens, the machine learning is going to be cut off and it's going to be handing over to an expert system. Expert system is basically what would an expert patient or a doctor do in certain cases. It's a rule-based system.
Right.
What's interesting there is that we looked very deeply at what OpenAPS was doing, for example, and inspired from what OpenAPS was doing, because what they're doing worked very well for that specific situation for us. So we got a lot of inspiration from that. And part of the expert system is based on that. It's basically a rule-based if then else system that makes sure that there's nothing funky happening, that you follow the standard practice if the machine learning isn't up to the reliability. Another way to saying is that machine learning is awesome. It really is awesome if the situation is understood, controlled, and as long as you understood the biases behind it. And it's not magic, it's not perfect, and you want to make sure you control it. Our control is making sure that we have a reliability, and that goes into then the expert system to make, and the expert system is reliable, solid, won't ever do crazy things. May not be as good on average as a machine learning, but it's never going to blow up.
Yeah. So I think to kind of summarize, there is a personalized component with machine learning, but if there are some tiny, I wouldn't call them issues, but if something is out of the ordinary comfort zone, it backs to the expert system.
Yes.
Perfect. Right. Let's move on to hardware. And I think a natural transition point would be to your controller, to the physical controller. Now, I have been lucky enough to have a play with it at events, and I think it used to be just a Sony locked down smartphone, but the most recent pictures that I've seen of it, there seem to be like a hardware element on the top of that. Can you discuss that in any way?
No, it's just another model of a lockdown smartphone. It's just not Sony anymore. It's just that the design of that one was slightly different. It looks like it's a hardware component, but it's not. It's basically a plastic piece on top of it. It's basically a hardware component that's reliable, lightweight, has a nuke. The nuke can be interesting for some people that like to actually hang it. Some people actually liked it. But no, there's nothing special. It's still a lockdown smartphone.
Okay, so natural lead from that, any plans to have a user's phone display capabilities, or just having that algorithm, that app, which is currently on the lockdown Android phone, on someone's smartphone?
We will have an app as soon as the current system are properly set up for cybersecurity. Meaning that it's one thing to have an interaction with your smartphone. You have something on top and you say, send a bolus, and then you have direct confirmation. It's another thing from a systems perspective to have an app on the background that makes decisions every 5 minutes and then communicates on the background every 5 minutes with your insulin pump. If you don't see what's happening, you don't know who has it. Now, the risk of that is that over the past 18 months, there was at least 3 or 4 scares with WhatsApp or this or that, basically cybersecurity scares. The reality is that even an up-to-date Android or iPhone today is not safe. It's even worse when it's not up to date. Now, some would say, yeah, but let's look at the risks, yada, yada, yada. We believe today that the Android or iPhone environments are not safe enough to have an app running in the background and controlling an insulin pump. There's just, for Christ's sake, for the latest version of Android, not the one that's out now, but the one before, there's 170 critical entryways. So basically ways to enter a phone. But all of them can be done without being seen, but a number of them can. And so if you have governments that can hack into your WhatsApps, that also means that there's malignant players that can enter other things. So that's why we have a lockdown smartphone where you can't access the internet, you cannot access other apps, it doesn't have Wi-Fi. It's just, we believe that current smartphones are too problematic and too prone to being hacked for an app in your background running on it to be hooked to your insulin pump. As soon as, however, both Google and Apple and Samsung, all three, are working on security components that will make it safe. As soon as that exists, we'll have an app within, I don't know, 6 months, basically quick, once that component exists. And that's basically our only. You're right to say we're a software company. We're a software company, and a number of us that have started the company were a little bit of cybersecurity freaks. And today, clearly, a lockdown smartphone like we have, it's a controlled environment, it's safe because you can't install other apps. It doesn't have Wi-Fi, it doesn't have internet. Standard smartphone, yeah, no. However, we will have, as an intermediate step at some point of time, something where it can run on this.
All right. Watch.
Is it so? It's not that we don't want to. It's just, as a company, as an individual, do you have a risk? Would you, as a person, you yourself, have the risk of being hacked and targeted specifically? Of course not. Let's look at the balance of risks and checks. However, as a company, we're too tempting a target. You can have hackers that will target it and say, look, pay me X million or we'll kill one of your patients.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, it's not that you do not want. If you felt like there was a secure way to do it today, you would have it ready. Yes. But so when you talk about those risks and the technology enabling you to do it in a secure way, to quote what you said, are you referring to things like, I think, for example, Samsung is working on, I think, Knox or something like that Insulet is using, which is that what you're referring to? Right.
Knox is this close to being okay to be used for Diabeloop. They're not there yet, but they're almost there.
Right. Okay, no, that, yeah, because I think Insulet is I obviously don't know what but they are using the same kind of pathways. That's why they will be launching on Samsung phones when they do launch phone control. Okay, interesting. We'll be following very closely, I guess. That's a very interesting take on that. Okay, I think we talked about phone and controller enough. CGM, not a lot to really discuss here. You work with Dexcom G6. I've been a Dexcom user since they launched here in the UK, and I think they're in the process of being rolled out in France now. Is that correct, G6s?
Yeah, they're being rolled out. The reimbursement is coming along, and so yes, they're being rolled out right now. G6 works. Dexcom's been a partner since the first days, almost since I don't know, 2015, something like that. They're the only AID approved sensor today. They work great. Nothing much more to add to it.
Okay, so I have to ask you, you worked with G4, G5, and now G6. When G7 is approved in Europe, will that be a sensor that you will also work with?
Of course.
Perfect.
When it's approved, when it rolls out, we don't have any information when, how, or anything, but the intent is absolutely to be approved and to work with the G7.
All right, and final part of the system, pumps, and there is a lot to talk about. So let's focus on Europe first of all, because I think that's kind of the first region that you will be officially launching in. So before we get into specific pumps, on a high level, can you talk me through how the commercial structure is going to look? So is it going to be a kind of a bundle-like product where you sell the algorithm with the continuous glucose monitor and the pump, or are they all individual components?
Complicated answer. It's going to be There's going to be three different things. So in France, we will start by selling a bundle because that's what the healthcare authorities asked us to start with. It'll be a bundle. initially with the Kaleido pump, the G6, and then the handset. And then the handset has the algorithm and the link with the what's called Diabeloop, so the data visualization platform. However,
Yep.
our intent, our objective is to be able to give choice and flexibility, which means that we will be moving towards a system where you're going to have the patient's going to have his CGM through reimbursed, personal expense, insurance, whatever, a pump, and then the Diabeloop DBLG1 handset is going to come in the middle and connect those together. And it'll be sold or reimbursed or whatever separately, kind of on its own merits. Now, given that, there will also be, in certain cases, bundles of the pump and the handset sold together in certain countries by certain providers. So there's going to be a little bit of all, but the intent is that at some point of time in the future, every patient has a CGM, a Dexcom CGM, and any of the 3 or 4 pumps that we work with that has it can choose to go out, get a handset, connect both, and use Diabeloop DBLG1.
Right. And what you described with that is what we have in the UK with CAM APS system. So where the pump and CGM reimbursement are completely separate, and then if a person with diabetes chooses to connect those, they just pay I think it's around £70 or £80 a month for the actual algorithm to connect those together. I know we're talking about Europe, so sorry to bring the UK into this, but you know. Okay, that's great. So I think you already touched on the countries. So that is France. Well, you in pre-launch in France already, so you have around, I think, 40, 50 people using it at the moment.
And we've stuck with that because we didn't have pumps available.
Right. So the France and German launch this year with, that is Kaleido and Dana I pumps at launch.
So the Kaleido, yes. The Dana I, so we've got a rechange with the new version of the Dana I that came out. And as soon as that's done, so we'll have the Dana I. And then after that, we will have a number of countries coming out with Roche as well.
In regions where multiple pumps are available, so one of the Roche pumps that you would integrate and the Dana pump or the Kaleido pump, subject to the funding in that region, patients will have a choice of which one to pick, right? Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Any more specific timelines in 2021 this year? Any kind of any month or at least quarter you can give us?
No, not yet, because again, there's specific regulations in France about what can be done or not. So it's not that I don't want to, it's that there's specific regulations about what can be said or not. But expect it sooner rather than later.
Okay, perfect. And then those additional European countries that you mentioned, that's a 2022 thing or late in 2021 thing?
There will be additional countries in 2021 for sure.
Okay, cool.
And not just France and Germany.
Cool. We'll be watching for sure. And so that covers 3 pump partners, Roche, Kaleido, and Dana. And then Japan. In Japan, you'll be launching with Terumo. Any kind of, what can you share about that?
Again, Terumo, I'd rather not talk about that specifically because Terumo has their own I don't know if there's any regulations around that in Japan, and
Right.
really for Japan, we're working together with Terumo, but Terumo being the large Japanese company, they're
Mm.
more kind of like in control of the timeline, the regulations, the regulatory steps, etc. in Japan for that. There's a lot of work. They're very involved, and we have, I don't know, 2 to 3 meetings per week to make it happen.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but beyond that, I'm not necessarily comfortable
Fair.
talking about specific
No,
timelines
of
on it.
course. No, it's fine. And to close off, US. Literally a couple of days ago, you announced your partnership with, I love the name of this pump, Panda Pump. It's so perfect. Which it's hasn't, obviously it's not yet launched in the US. It's still in development. I'm not going to really focus on that just yet. But I wanted to ask you about a clinical trial that you guys had undergoing in 2020. I think 184 participants, which is
Yep.
part of your effort to submit for your FDA clearance as an eye controller, which Diabeloop has just been submitted as an eye controller literally a couple of days ago. So do you mind talking me through maybe how that trial went? Has that now finished?
Now we started. We had the approval of it in the final days of 2019, like literally
Right.
December 28th, I think, for the clinical trial. Now, what was astounding is that by February 10th, we had 183 participants enrolled and
Right.
quite a few equipped. And literally by March 15th, we had 100. Well, there was a randomization group, but everyone that should have been equipped was equipped by March 15th. That was like, yay, great start. And
Week
then there's
later,
this there's
COVID.
a
Yes.
little thing that came in
Yes.
here. And really,
I feel, yeah.
COVID really blew it all up.
Can you expand on that? I haven't heard much about this thing. What is this thing? I feel like I missed that on what is
Well,
that?
it's a very basic thing.
Yeah.
The clinical trial
Mm,
assumes that patients come to the hospital
mm,
I think it was every 3 weeks or every
right.
month. I mean, the situation today is bad, but put yourself back in April last year.
Mm, mm.
Do you want people with type 1 coming to a hospital? The answer is no,
No,
absolutely no way. And it's like that
no.
hurt. That really hurt because,
Mm,
the patients were unhappy, to say the least. Some were
mm,
relatively pissed off that they had to give up the system. Um, the reality is, and on top of that, we had supply issues because of COVID. We had certain of the consumables that were coming from Korea or the US that couldn't come over. And so between the consumables issue and the having patients come to the hospital, because we're thinking at some point, well, let's do the visits virtual, and well, we wouldn't have the consumables to end the trial anyways. And so
yeah.
it was just, frankly speaking, miserable,
Mm,
and painful to have to stop that clinical trial. So I think on average we have like 5 weeks worth of data for every patient. Now, the data is good. We'll publish a paper on that. I don't know, ADA, I think. Anyway, a couple of months. But
right.
the data is good, but clearly not enough data to be able to
Mm,
submit to the FDA.
of
And
course.
so right now, COVID, we're kind of hoping to be able to restart it end of this year or something, but
Mm,
it just it doesn't feel right
mm,
to bring 180 odd people repeatedly to the hospital in the current environment. So we will be restarting the trial. And I had another question from either on the social media or from doctors last week saying, hey, when is it restarting? I want to restart. People that want to make sure that we're in the trial that want to continue it, but no. So it will happen in 2021. When? Don't know. Anyone's got a magic ball about how COVID's going to go? I'll take it happily.
Same. If anyone has it, please email me. No, I think that is, I think, so understandable. But also, thank you for kind of saying just how difficult. I guess it must have been so incredibly difficult, wanting to, finish it and show how the system works, and then COVID. Anyway. So back end of that, you announced a partnership with Panda Pump. I'm just going to keep saying Panda because I love the name of it, Panda. So that when it's in however many times it's available in the US, you will work with them.
Yes.
Cool. I think that kind of covers everything that I wanted to talk to. Any kind of topic that you wanted to mention before we say goodbye?
There's one thing about upcoming future developments as well that we kind of covered at the EASD. We've got a couple of interesting things. One, I'm not necessarily going to talk about our secondary product, DBL-HU, so for Diabeloop for highly unstable diabetes, which is, it's really important to us because there's people that don't necessarily have a solution even with existing closed loop that have really unusual physiologies, and that you need a system that can be adapted to really, really unusual physiologies. So it's important to us. Got to see Mark late last year. Is it a large number of patients? No, it's not. But it's important. It's people that really are in a very, very tough spot. Not just a tough spot, a very tough spot. So we're super excited that we've got a team working on that we're going to be starting discussions, have already started discussion with the French government on the reimbursement for that. So that's good. And the other thing is upcoming trials. We've got a trial with, it's going to be done with teens on the ability to not announce meals anymore. Because
unannounced croissants.
Unannounced croissants. Because as you know, you saw the curves, that whole spike in HbA1c around 12 to 15 years old, and there's lots of possible reasons for it, and hormones and growth and whatnot. Yeah, one of the components, and I don't know if it's the biggest component, but one of the components clearly is the fact that you go to high school. Do you want to take out your system at lunch and do the math, etc.? No, you don't. I mean, no one wants to, clearly, but it's even more important then. And so the ability to have a system that can manage meals without the meals being announced or carb counted or anything like that. You don't, even with diabetes, you don't even need to carb count today. Okay, clearly that's not necessary. But with that, you don't have to even announce it. Are you going to be able to get 5.5% HbA1c without announcing meals? Well, clearly not. That is not realistic. But is it needed? No, it's not needed either. If you can get the average of people, I think that the median, the average is around, the median is around 9% HbA1c or 9.3% on that age group. It's half them are above. And so the ability to allow the option to have a fully closed loop if you want to. And if you want to announce some meals, good. The more information the algorithm has, the better he's going to do. But with our simulators and the machine learning that we have and the power of the algorithm, we are very, very confident that people will be able to go out and actually not announce meals, and it'll work just fine.
And on the unannounced meals point, I think it was at ATTD. You mentioned a real life example from, I think it was a mother or one of your users that actually decided not to bolus for meals because she and her results, and this was real world data, right? Can you speak to that?
Sure. So this is a person, she's around 7.3% HbA1c. And again,
Right.
she's got her own personal challenges in life, personal and at work. And,
Right.
you know, it's everyone's choice. And her personal choice is that she wants to be able to focus 100% on kids and work. And as a result, she is maybe announcing a one meal every 2 days. So, you know, most of the time she's not announcing meals.
Right.
And she's got 7.4% HbA1c with virtually no hypos.
Mm.
And it works for her. And that's the most important thing. It works for her.
Mm. That's super exciting, and we'll be watching for that trial and what comes out as a result of that for sure. That's everything. And just before I go, I just wanted to make a point and acknowledge Diabeloop's kind of commitment in the diabetes community. You guys have been the platinum partner for the DDoC scholarship program, and just your involvement in that, I think it really goes a really long way. So I just wanted to make that point.
Cheers. Thanks.